My aim over the next couple of weeks is to get us ready for Easter. This is huge for us as the people of God. And of course, I want to get us ready with the message of Easter, that life-changing message that Jesus lived and died, was buried, and rose again on the third day. We can never pull away from that anchor of our faith, so we're going to focus on that message. But at the same time, I want us to focus on the mission of Easter. The mission of Easter. Because the fact is that we are called as followers of Jesus to infect our world with the gospel of Jesus Christ, the gospel of the resurrection of Jesus Christ that has the power to really radically impact people's lives. Resurrection impact. Now let's open our Bibles this morning to Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. And the book of Acts shows us how the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and this is one of the greatest evidences and the proof that the resurrection really did happen because of what it did in the lives of that cowardly band of followers of Jesus. And what happened after the resurrection was that they were forged into a movement that shook the world of their day. And the book of Acts shows us that. So Jesus, after he rose again and before he ascended back to heaven and sent the Holy Spirit upon his followers, he said this to his disciples, Acts 1:8. He says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." And so the book of Acts shows us how those Spirit-empowered followers of Jesus obeyed him and became witnesses of the good news of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, all the way to the ends of the earth, starting where they lived in Jerusalem and pressing out all the way to the ends of the earth. And one of the ways this happened is through missionary teams, like one that is led by the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was himself radically impacted by the resurrection of Jesus when he met the risen Lord Jesus face to face on the road to Damascus. So he's leading this team of followers of Jesus. They travel all over the world of their day, proclaiming the gospel, proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And everywhere they went, people were saved. And churches were started. And so here in Acts chapter 17, we sort of catch up with Paul and his missionary team on one of their journeys. And they happen to be in a region that we know today as the nation of Greece. And the context shows us that Paul is sort of in between gigs, if you will. He's waiting in Athens for his team to catch up with him so that they can then go on to the next part of their mission trip. And that's where we are here when we come to our text, and it's where we're going to camp for the next couple of weeks as we get ready for Easter. So I want to pick up reading in Acts 17. Let's just read 3 verses to get us started, beginning in verse 16. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day, with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, he seems to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Now, Athens was and is a world-class city. It's an amazing place. And so for Paul to go there must have been a little bit like us going to New York City for the first time. And how many of you have been to New York City? Remember the first time you went? I mean, that's the way they know who the tourists are in New York City, is these are the ones that are walking around with their mouths wide open looking up. It's just an amazing place, just bewildering. And so it must have felt that way for Paul to walk into this city. He'd probably never been anywhere quite like Athens. But he doesn't waste this opportunity like a tourist would. The fact is that he begins to preach immediately, begins to preach the good news of Jesus and the resurrection. He infects that city with the virus of the gospel. And we're going to see next week how Paul unpacks this message in a famous sermon. If you want to get a taste of it, just look at verses 30 and 31. Where Paul, in the middle of this sermon, is saying to the people in Athens, there, in the past, God overlooked your ignorance. But now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man, by Jesus, he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him, by raising Jesus from the dead. So you get a taste of what Paul begins to talk about as he moves into the city. And what I want you to understand in the course of this series, and what I want you to see today, is that the resurrection of Jesus Christ still has the power to radically impact lives in ways that we can hardly imagine. That just like Paul coming to Athens and beginning to proclaim the message of the good news, it slowly but surely began to take root in that city, and it ultimately transformed the culture of that city. It can do the same thing in our city. And I think because we have seen so little of that kind of transformation that we sort of just give up hope and really forget that the message of the resurrection has that kind of power to change people's lives. So, how do we deliver that message? How do we become the rails down which that message of the good news and the resurrection of Jesus can move into people's lives and transform them? You know, the Athens of Paul's day is very much like our culture today, like where you go to school and where you live and where you work and where you play. It's very much like that. Spiritually dead, morally bankrupt, philosophically confused and deceived. It's very similar. So how do we, as followers of Jesus, behave in a culture like that, so that the message, that life-impacting message of the resurrection of Jesus can truly do what it has the potential of doing? Now you notice it says in verse 16 that Paul was waiting for them, waiting for his team to catch up with him so that they could move on to the next part of their journey. And so it's while he's waiting that something happens in him and through him that would impact the lives of many people and alter the course of a city. While he was waiting. Some of you were alive when the Beatles were famous. Many of you weren't alive, but you've perhaps heard of the Beatles and their lead singer, John Lennon. And the last album that John Lennon recorded contained a song called Beautiful Boy. Maybe you've heard it or remember it. Beautiful Boy. It was actually written for his son, Sean, whom John loved dearly. Sean brought great joy to his life. Perhaps he's writing it because he feels guilty that he's neglected his son in that way. But in that song, there is one line that John Lennon is famous for. It's a famous quote of Lennon when he says, "Life is what happens to you while you are busy making other plans." Life is what happens to you when you are busy making other plans. And isn't that the case? I mean, there's things that we're constantly thinking and waiting for to happen and planning for to happen. And so our life is consumed about those things. We're waiting for something, but all the while life is just racing right underneath our noses. And if we're not careful, we can miss the opportunities that God puts right in front of us because we're waiting and planning for something else to happen. Life is what happens while you're planning for something else to happen. So you're waiting to graduate from seminary so you can go do real ministry. You're waiting to get the next great job. You're waiting to get married. You're waiting to get that degree, whatever you're waiting for. And so your life is just rushing by while what are you waiting for? God has those opportunities right under your noses. So thankfully, Paul doesn't make that mistake. So while he has some free time in this world-class city of Athens, he made good use of his time. And we're going to learn from Paul here today and over the next couple of weeks how the Spirit of God can do in us what he did through Paul. And that is to empower us to be witnesses of the resurrection of Jesus in such a way that can really impact and change the lives of other people. And I will just say this, that Easter is a wonderful opportunity for us to do that, obviously. I mean, we celebrate the risen Lord Jesus 365 days a year, but Easter is huge for us as the people of God, and so it's a prime opportunity. And so you've got people, casual church attenders out there who would be amazingly open to an invitation from you. And if you can't just come right out and share the gospel of the resurrection of Jesus with them, the very least you can bring them to church with you on Easter Sunday. Grab a handful of these inviter cards and just give them out to your friends at work or the gym or wherever you're hanging out. And you'll be surprised because they're going to hear the message of the resurrection. And we're going to see again how that message has power. So what do we learn from the Apostle Paul about how to be the rails down which the gospel and the resurrection of Jesus run into the lives of people? Number one, open your eyes. Open your eyes. It says in verse 16 that Paul was distressed to see that Athens was full of idols. And that word see doesn't mean just a casual glance. It means a careful consideration, a careful observation of something. And so he takes notice of the fact that this city is literally smothered with idols. Just think about statues and shrines and temples on virtually every corner. Nan and I have been to Athens, and it really is an amazing city. Even in the old part of the city and the ancient part of the city, you can still see everywhere you turn, you see ruins of statues and temples and shrines. It's just everywhere. In the days of Paul, the city was really not really a city. It was a big town. It was only about 10,000 population, scholars estimate. But they also estimate that there were some 30,000 idols in the city. And so that would lead one commentator to say it was easier to find a god in Athens than to find a man. It's just hard for us to comprehend how the city could be so smothered with idolatry. From just about every place in the city of Athens, even to this day, you can see the Acropolis. And sitting on top of the Acropolis is the Parthenon. You perhaps have seen pictures of the ruins of the Parthenon. In its day, it was a massive, beautiful temple. Inside was a gold and ivory statue of the goddess Athena. And so this was just everywhere you looked. But the point is that these idols and shrines were more than just beautiful works of art and sculpture and architecture, because these idols represented things and people that others turn to and look to for security and meaning in their life in the absence of a relationship with the one true God. Idolatry is hideous, and I don't know if we completely grasp that. Someone said that the human heart is one great idol factory, that we generate and produce idols that somehow we think can meet our needs for satisfaction and security in life, because we don't have a real connection with the one true God who alone gives us that meaning and that security in life. And the fact is, here in Athens, there are thousands and thousands of these idols, saying to us that they really weren't sure what the gods expected. They certainly didn't want to make any of them mad, so they had to put up a statue for everyone. In fact, we're going to see next week that they even had a statue to the unknown God, just in case they've missed one. They don't want to make any of them mad. Just in case they put up this one to the unknown God. So Paul's eyes are wide open to this, to the powerful grip of idolatry in Athens. And can I ask you today, first of all, do you see your own idols? Do you see your own idols? What is it that you are turning to in the absence of a vital relationship with Almighty God? What are you looking to for happiness and security in your life? But also, can you see beyond? Can you see the idols around you in our culture today, in entertainment and athletic sports and in so many other ways? You see the idolatry just dripping from just about every part of our culture. Keep your eyes open as you move as witnesses into your culture. So open your eyes. And number two, engage your mind. Engage your mind. Verse 16 says that Paul saw the city full of idols, smothered in idols. And he understood that there was something behind all of that beauty of the idols that was really a spiritual darkness. And so Athens was this academic and intellectual and philosophical hub for the world of its day. Think Harvard, think Yale, think Princeton, think Oxford. It was all of those places in one. Look again at verse 18. We read it earlier. It says that a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Now, the Epicureans were a strange bunch. They were a philosophical party, if you will, whose worldview was that the gods were just out there somewhere and engaged in other things, busy with other things, and they weren't too interested in what human beings were doing. They weren't involved in the human experience. The Epicureans also happened to believe that there was no life after death. So you put those two things together. There's no authority out there that's holding you accountable, and there's nothing after death. So what do? The thing that brings meaning to life is just to cram it as full of pleasure as you can get it. Epicurean delights. And that's the way they lived their life. You can imagine how provoked they were when they hear Paul talking about Jesus being raised from the dead, that there's life after death. So the Epicureans, and then there were the Stoics. They were kind of at the other end of the spectrum. They believed that the gods were everywhere and in everything. They were in the trees, and they were in the stars and the rocks and the statues. The Stoics believed, like Hindus believe today, that God is everywhere and everything, and everywhere is God. And so the gods have everything tightly under control. There's nothing we can do to change that. And so their favorite word was whatever. Whatever. We can't change the direction. This is fate. And so we may as well just give up, just surrender. When you call somebody a Stoic, it means they're sort of apathetic or seem to be apathetic or disinterested. And that was the way they approached life. But for all of that, they were amused at what Paul was talking about here. They called him there in verse 17 or 18, they called him a babbler. It was really a put down. They call him a babbler. The word literally means a bird that pecks at seeds and chews on it and spits it out again. And it came to describe people. They said, Paul, you're just a seed picker. You're just picking up stuff here and there where you've heard it. But we're interested because you might have picked up something we don't have. He was talking about Jesus and the resurrection. They misunderstood. They thought he was talking about a couple of more gods that they needed to pick up and add to their collection. You see how confused they are? And yet the thing that I want you to notice is that Paul wasn't ashamed of speaking the straight out, straightforward gospel of the resurrection of Jesus Christ in that setting. He wasn't ashamed. He simply, I want you to have confidence in the gospel that it will hold its own in the world of ideas. You don't have to water it down. You don't have to explain it away or soften it. Just let it go. Share it and let it go. It has power, that message does. That's what Paul says in Romans 1:16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. It's got power. It can impact people. And so we better understand, too, how the gospel confronts the other worldviews out there. Perhaps you noticed that last week Stephen Hawking died. Stephen Hawking was probably the greatest scientist of this generation. But he also happened to be very far from God. I can guarantee you now, Stephen Hawking believes in God. I promise you that. But before he died sometime, he wrote this. He said, when people ask me if a God created the universe, I tell them that the question itself makes no sense. We are each free to believe what we want. And it's my view that the simplest explanation is there is no God, little g. No one created our universe. No one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization. There is probably no heaven and no afterlife either. We have this one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe, and for that I am extremely grateful. I think it's interesting that one of the greatest thinkers of history could talk about the grand design of the universe and not see that that implies a designer. So we better understand that the gospel, the resurrection of Jesus, will hold its own in the world of ideas, and we need to be ready to give an answer. 1 Peter 3:15, but in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. So open your eyes and engage your mind. But number 3, soften your heart. Soften your heart. We're told in verse 16 that Paul was distressed by what he saw. The city smothered in idols. He was distressed by it. He was emotionally, that word means to be emotionally moved. What is it that moved Paul? What is it that should motivate us as gospel witnesses, as resurrection witnesses? Let me tell you what it wasn't. I don't think Paul was moved by just the desire to win an argument. I don't think it was necessary that he wanted to just get some other people to move over to his way of seeing things. And it shouldn't be for us either. That's not our motivation. Certainly we believe and respond to the great commission of Jesus that we're to go and make disciples and to be his witnesses, because Jesus told us to do that, and we obey him. And certainly we are moved with compassion for people who are far from God. They are perishing. But let me tell you, I believe what the greatest motivation in Paul's heart, and should be the greatest motivation in ours, when we see our culture just immersed in and smothered in idolatry, the motivation is the glory of God. People are giving to other people and to things and to pleasures and experiences what belongs only to Almighty God. Their worship, their praise, their exaltation. I mean, this just hit me as we were standing here worshiping a few minutes ago and singing that this is what we were created to do. We were not created to find our meaning and our satisfaction and security and the stuff out there in the world. We are created for this, and it's only this that supplies that meaning in our lives. So let your heart be softened to the glory of God. And when it is, it'll be softened to the needs of people, because you see, you're going to want God to fill them with what He and He alone can give them if you really love people. Open your eyes, engage your mind, soften your heart, and finally, move your feet. Move your feet. I think it's interesting that Paul he walks into the city and he's distressed at what he sees. But I'm thinking, what would I do if I were in his shoes? Probably I would just keep walking, but my eyes would be so glazed over, I would just ignore all of the decadence and the idolatry around me. I would shut it out, because that's what I tend to do now. You know, there's so much junk in our culture today, and my eyes just glaze over. Does that happen for you? Neither does Paul just throw up his hands in disgust and say, I've had enough of this city, and walk out, just give up on Athens. We don't see him picketing the streets of Athens saying, tear down these statues. And what does he do? He walks into the city armed only with the gospel and the message of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, as was his custom, verse 17 says that he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. So, you know, as far as we know, there was not a single other believer in Athens at the time. We have no indication that there was another Christian, Christ follower, in all of Athens. But there were some people who believed in the one true God and worshiped the one true God, the Jews, God-fearing Greeks. And so Paul did as he typically does. He went to the synagogue, and there he reasoned with them from the scriptures about Jesus' suffering and his death and his resurrection. But then he also says he does this in the marketplace. In the marketplace. Now, don't get the idea that Paul was standing there at the checkout line at Walmart and preaching at people as they were stuffing their groceries in their bags. Reason means he was having a legitimate conversation with people. So he's out in the marketplace. Think Sundance Square downtown or the Commons at TCU, just looking for opportunities to engage people in a conversation. And when he got that opportunity, he spoke with them about the good news of Jesus and the resurrection. That's what he did. So he moves into the city, and we told in verse 19 that then there was some really high-thinking people that decided they wanted to have a conversation. They take him to a place called the Areopagus, which is kind of the city hall of Athens where all of the big decisions are made, and so they want to know more. But the thing I want you to see again is that whether it's in the Jewish synagogue or out there at Target or in the marketplace or in the Areopagus, the message is still the same. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jesus lived, he died, he was buried, and he rose again. And he can change your life if you trust him. I'm going to ask you to bow your head right now. And I'll leave you with a couple of questions. Question number one. You have heard that life-changing message of the gospel. You have heard it. Has it impacted your life? Has it changed you? Have you trusted in that one who lived and died and rose again for you? If not, right where you're sitting right now, you can just say, Jesus, I trust you. I repent of my sins and I put my trust in you. And you'll see the radical impact that the message of the gospel can have in your life. Second question. Who is waiting for you to tell them that powerful message? Somebody comes to your mind, somebody you go to school with, somebody you work with, somebody you work out with, but you've never simply explained to them the message of the gospel, the good news that Jesus lived and died and rose again for them to have life. And right where you're sitting right now, will you simply say, Lord, help me, open a door for me to invite them to Easter. Open the door for me to talk to them about the resurrection of Jesus. He's alive. Father, I pray that these last moments that we're together, that you will break our hearts, Lord, for our culture. But also, Lord, would you just brand in us a courage. We won't give up on our culture. We won't give up on our friends who are so far from you, that we'll be faithful with the message of the gospel and the resurrection of Jesus in his name. Amen. Let's stand together and worship.